This is the appointed time, and we have a quorum. This is the subcommittee to follow up on issues relating to the three-runway system at the Hong Kong International Airport, and we call this meeting to order. And I thank members for attending today's meeting, despite this is still the LegCo's recess. Let us first invite the administration and representatives of the Airport Authority Hong Kong in first. Good morning, Secretary. Good morning. In the new legislative year, we have the new administration, and I should go through the attendance list with you. We have Mr. Frank Chan, Secretary for Transport and Housing, Mr. Andy Yao, Head of Airport Expansion Project Coordination Office, and Mr. Wallace Yao, Deputy Secretary for Transport and Housing. And we also have from the Airport Authority Hong Kong, Mr. Fred Lam, the Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Wilson Fong, Executive Director, Corporate Development, and also Mr. William Low, Executive Director, Finance. Thank you. In accordance with the agenda, I would first invite the AA representatives to walk us through the detailed funding plan of the three-runway project with the aid of a PowerPoint presentation. But before you do, may I also invite Secretary to give a few opening remarks. Thank you, Chairman. Members, the three-runway system project, the 3RS project, commenced on the 1st of August last year. This project will last for 8 years. Once commissioned, the 3RS will substantially increase the capacity of the Hong Kong International Airport to cope with future needs. The subcommittee has been following up on issues relating to the three-runway system, including financing matter. And on the 5th of January 2016, and also on the 7th of February this year, at these two meetings, we briefed members on the funding arrangement, and the financial advisor has advised the Airport Authority to raise funds through 3 channels: operating surplus, airport construction fee, and incremental borrowings. And the MOD price is $141.5 billion. In October last year, the AAHK appointed a financial consultant to conduct a detailed funding study on the detailed funding plan in relation to raising debt of $69 billion from the market. The objective of the study is to analyze different debt structures, identify suitable forms of financial instruments, and make recommendations on the financial instruments in relation to their timing, size, and tenor, etc. That will enable the Airport Authority to raise funds for the 3RS project in the most optimal manner. The detailed funding plan has been completed, and the AAHK will brief members on the details of the plan. I'd like to take this opportunity to brief members on the 2 core elements of the plan, that is green bonds and retail bonds. In the budget of 2016-17, the government indicated that we will promote our strength and also the advantages in developing green bonds to encourage investors' engagement. And in this study, the advisor has recommended that green bonds be included as an element of the funding plan to for the AA to showcase its corporate responsibility. We have also received suggestions from members that retail bonds be issued as part of the funding plan for the 3RS so that we have greater participation from the public. We're delighted to learn that the AAHK has taken up the advisor's recommendation to issue retail bonds so as to generate investment return. The government attaches great importance to the funding plan of the 3RS project and also financial risk management to ensure that the 3RS project can be implemented smoothly. The financial advisor, in preparing the detailed funding plan, has also taken into account various risks, and we are going to conduct as an ongoing basis, assess and mitigate financial risk management when necessary. And the financial advisor has also emphasized that in relation to detailed funding plan, the AAHK does not require any form of financial backing or guarantee from the government. Chairman, I now give the floor to the colleagues from the Airport Authority Hong Kong to give you more details on the detailed funding plan. Thank you, Secretary. So who would like to walk us through the presentation? Yes, thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. Let me take this opportunity to walk you through the detailed funding plan as recommended by the financial advisor. First of all, as mentioned by the Secretary, the overall construction cost of the 3RS is $141.5 billion MOD prices. Now, this is basically the scope of the project of 3RS. We need to reclaim about 650 hectares of land. We need to build a runway of 3,800 meters. We need to build a third runway passenger building with automated people mover system and new baggage handling system. We're also going to expand the existing Terminal 2 by at least 100%, and we have a holistic plan to support the 3RS. As mentioned by Secretary, 2 years ago, we came up with the overall financial arrangement plan. 1/3 of the $141.5 billion will come from the operating surplus, and 18%, about $26 billion, will come from the airport construction fee. And finally, 49%, close to $69 billion, will come from incremental borrowings, basically in the form of issuing bonds or raising debt, loans from banks. Now, we need to implement the detailed arrangements of the $69 billion borrowings. We need to analyze different debt structures and identify suitable forms of financial instruments. And we also need to make recommendations on the financial instruments that will enable the authority to raise funds in the most optimal manner in terms of the size, timing, and tenor. And the key funding objectives and approach are as follows. It should be consistent with our budget, and it should be done in a timely manner. We are not going to raise funds in one go. We are going to phase it in the coming 8 years. It should also be cost effective. We should allow flexibility because the market is volatile. When we're talking about 6 or 7 years down the road, we need sufficient flexibility to deal with different situations. And in examining all potential forms of financing, we should also consider the possibility of allowing public participation. We need to engage very closely with the relevant credit agencies, investors, and banks. We need to have good communication with them so that we can enhance transparency and to enlist their support for the project. Finally, at a reasonable cost, we should minimize the refinancing risk and manage financial risk exposure. On analyzing financial instruments, the advisor conducted a comprehensive analysis of all the financial instruments available in the market. 2 conclusions were drawn in the study. First, the debt market capacity is substantially in excess of the airport authority's funding needs. And number 2, we operate on prudent commercial principles under the Airport Authority Ordinance. And through different financing options, we have been able to raise debts to finance our operation, and we have a good track record, including bank loan and bond markets. We have been raising loans and issuing bonds, but of course this exercise will be done on a larger scale. And there are 6 available financial instruments according to the analysis. But I want to emphasize that there are other financial instruments which are good apart from these 6, but according to the advisor's recommendation, we're going to focus on these 6 instruments to raise $69 billion. We have commercial banks, loans, institution bonds, green bonds, retail bonds, revolving credit facilities, and export credit facilities. And I'll try to give some salient points on each and every one of them. The Hong Kong loan market has good liquidity with very good capacity. In 2016, the Hong Kong loan market reached $349 billion, and even in the first half of 2017, the figure has reached $269 billion. So I can say that the market is flushed with very good liquidity, and the tenor of 5 years remain widely accepted in the market, and high-grade borrowers can tap the market with a loan size of about $20 billion in a transaction. The second type is institutional bonds. In other words, the bonds will be taken up by institutional investors. We have 2 different kinds, US dollars and Hong Kong dollars bond issuers. But there are other kinds of institutional bonds in euro, in Singapore dollars, and even in other foreign currencies. But we focus on the US dollars because it's pegged to Hong Kong dollars. The US dollar market represents the largest bond market in the world. And in 2016, the US bond issuance in Asia, excluding Japan, was 1,416 billion Hong Kong dollars. And even in the first half of 2017, the figure stood at $1,175 billion. That means the capacity is far in excess of what we need.
And of course, USD market is also a very good market. And also during the past 5 years, whilst the USD market has become more mature, but then compared to, the Hong Kong bond market has become well established, and through Hong Kong dollar bond market in 2016, we managed to issue some 18 billion Hong Kong dollar bonds, and then in the first half of 2017, some 7 billion Hong Kong dollars. Well, for green bonds, they are very similar to other types of bonds, but then the only difference is that whatever you get from the issue of green bonds, you will have to invest in green assets. So that will also encourage enterprises to invest in qualified green assets after obtaining the funds. So this is a growing market, and it's also becoming more mature. And in 2016 alone, so the total green bonds issued totaled some $697 billion, and in the first half of 2017, it amounted to 480 billion Hong Kong dollars. So it's a developing market, and if you look at Hong Kong's experience for MTRC and also Link REIT, they also issued green bonds before, and that would also be very encouraging to us, because under the 3RS, we'll be investing quite a large quantity in green bonds. For example, we briefly talk about the wide shape passenger terminal, and according to the estimated cost, is about $26 billion, and there is a very high chance that we can raise funds through the issue of green bonds, and that will also show our commitment to green issues. And we believe that in terms of the price setting and so on, that would also be a very good way to invest. And also for green bonds, as I just said, the key features are that the proceeds of the bond will have to be applied to eligible green projects. It will have to be a clear process in order to enable people to evaluate and also look at the progress and so on. Issuers will also have to be able to track it. And the difference is that, for retail bonds, for the retail investors, they'll be able to invest in that. And in the past, we have also issued I-bonds. Other than I-bonds, institutions have also been issuing retail bonds, even though the amount was not very significant. For example, in 2002-2003, AAHK also issued retail bonds, and if we were to do it again, this would be the third round. And our advisor suggested that we should issue retail bond to the in the size of about 3 to 5 billion Hong Kong dollars, and it has to be at fixed rate, because there is still some time to go before the actual issue of this retail bond. We are still not able to tell you exactly what rate will be set for it. But then we hope that behind it, we are actually trying to balance the whole project, because given the fact that we have Hong Kong dollar and US dollar bonds, we have also got bank loans and green bonds and so on. We believe that there should also be retail bonds, so it's a more balanced approach. And that would also enable investors to have a long-term return on their investment. Well, for the general principles of the detailed funding plan, as I've already briefly set out, HSBC said in its report that is, before coming to its detailed recommendations, they also set out the general principles. First, bonds should represent a significant component of the detailed funding plan, about 2/3, and then for bank loans, it should take up about 1/3 of the total cost, and will be issuing retail bonds to enable the public to participate in the project. And also there should also be revolving bank facilities to be kept to meet potential unexpected liquidity requirements. So this is a top-up approach. And also, last but not least, well, during the early stage, we can issue long-dated bonds, and then in the later period, we can also issue shorter-dated bonds. The most important thing is that for the repayment period and also for the maturity of the bonds, that is, they would only be mature about 3 to 5 years upon the commissioning of the 3RS. That is to minimize the refinancing risks. Well, this chart shows you very vividly as to what is going to happen. This is an indicative timeline. Well, if you look at the axis, actually, you can see we are in 2017 and 18. Next year will be 2018-19. And then in the second half of 2018-19, that is 12 months from now, we'll start the work. That is the near-term transactions. So we can call that immediate-term transactions, and that would last until 2019-20. And then starting from 2021, you would call that the start of the medium-term transactions. That would start only later. And I'll be explaining why we have this phasing, why we have to divide it into near-term and medium-term. Well, if you look at the longitude, the vertical portion, well, for bonds, I've also set up, and I'd like to emphasize this, that is, there is a bracket stating that for institutional bonds, that would also include green bonds. So when the conditions are appropriate, when the terms are attractive, we will also be making use of institutional bonds, and part of that will be issued in the form of green bonds. And of course, there will be USD bonds and also Hong Kong dollar bonds. And of course, for the bottom part, we will also take up bank loans. And then for the issue of bonds in the second part of 2019-20, we will first issue a 10-year Hong Kong dollar bond amounting to some $4 billion, and using the jargon of the banks or the banking sector, we'll set this U curve so that the market would know our capacity, and also how good we are in terms of raising funds in the market. And given the fact that the appetite would not be very big, so we'll be looking at the opportunities, and where opportunities are there, we will also take up further. So you can see from the chart that we have not set out exactly which year we're going to do what, but then we'd like to do more Hong Kong dollar bonds, because to us, in terms of our expenses and revenue is in Hong Kong dollars, and we'd also like to promote the development of Hong Kong dollar bonds. That's the reason why we'll be doing more in that. So we'll be watching the trend very closely, and there'll be also be a 3-year bond, and we'll be taking up the advice from the advisor. That is, the maximum will be $5 billion, and usually the bonds should mature in 3 years, so that would constitute the main thrust of it. And then for the medium term, that is in the next 5 years, you can see that the tenor will be shortening, because we don't need to have such long tenor or long dated bonds, so that would range from 5 years to 7 years. And also, if you look at the amount, there is a range. Why do we set it as in the form of a range? Because by that time, we're talking about 3 years down the road, and then 5 or 7 years down the road. So as the market changes all the time, we can't say that it has to be $10 billion or $15 billion. We have to keep this flexibility so that the management will have the flexibility in dealing with that. So that's why you can see that it's in the form of a range. And so when you look at the right-hand column, that's the total amount. So why is it that it can be in the range of $55 to $78 billion? Because you did mention that it should be $69 billion. So the maximum would be $78 billion, but then the lower range would be 55. But then the target has always been about $69 billion. That's our target. Just now, I also said that on top of that, there is also a bottom-up approach, or a top-up approach. That is, if there is any unforeseen circumstances, we will still have the revolving bank facility available. So the upside of it is that we can take out the loans anytime we want, and then we can repay it anytime we want. So there is a lot of flexibility under this arrangement, so that if that is a top-up approach, on top of the $69 billion, we believe that that's pragmatic and practicable, and it's also very robust. And also for the funds to be raised, I'd like to show it in a chart. So you can see it's a typical S-curve, and then the target would be $69 billion, and that would be 24-25. That's the time when the 3RS will be completed and commissioned. And then for the upper range of $78 billion and lower range of $55 billion is just the upper and lower range, or lower. And we also have the confidence that we'll be able to raise the required funds in the market, and we will also be able to get new loans. And third is also robust and possible, and we will also not need any financial backing or guarantee from the government. So looking at the way forward, on Monday this week, the board already accepted a proposal. So in terms of the framework, we have been given the in-principle endorsement, but then we'll be monitoring the trends closely in the market, and also we'll be monitoring our needs, and we'll be making appropriate adjustments. And under the principle of prudent financial management, and where market permits, we will be executing the plan accordingly. So that's all I'd like to report. Thank you. Okay, the floor is now open to our members. Well, we don't have many people, 4 minutes each. First, Mr. Yu Si-wing. Thank you, Chairman. Well, just now, I was pleased to see from Mr. Law's presentation that the fundraising activities will be conducted very smoothly, and the 3RS will be good for Hong Kong's economy, tourism, and our developments. So I hope that while we raise funds, the infrastructure project can be implemented according to plan, so that it can be completed by 23-24. And also for the $5 billion retail bonds, I also gave some advice to the AA earlier. I suggested that we should issue retail bonds, because that would be a chance for the public to be involved. And that is a measure to enable the public to be involved in the 3RS project. The most important thing is the public should pay more attention to this. I have two questions. First, on the levy to be imposed by the AA in the form of airport construction fee, or ACF, well, we've been paying a lot for that, because we will have to pay by credit card, and also in terms of liquidity, some risks will have to be taken up, and also in terms of manpower, there is also a cost. We have also discussed with the AA, and the AA said that it's very difficult to quantify the amount of costs taken up by the tourism sector. So on this issue, they are still adopting a wait-and-see attitude. And recently, the TIC, or the Tourism Industry Council, already engaged the Polytechnic University to look at the workload involved, and also in terms of the cost involved, so that there can be a study. And then in November, the report will be available. I hope that the AA will be looking at the cost that has been taken up by the trade for the development of this infrastructure project, so that an appropriate compensation or cost will be paid by the AA to the trade, so that in supporting this project, the trade would also be getting its fair share. So that's the first question. Second is about the ACF, the airport construction fee. Well, 18% out of the or $26 billion will come from that. So I wonder, for the $26 billion from the ACF, what was the increase in manpower and so on? If you are able to raise that earlier than expected, will you stop levying that fee? Or is it that you will wait until after the completion or commissioning of the 3RS? So have you come to any conclusion yet? Will it be the Bureau or the AA answering the question? Yes, Mr. Lim. Thank you. Well, on the second question, I'll answer that first. Well, on many occasions, we have already publicly said about this. That is with regard to the 3RS loans and so on. After we have repaid the entire sum, we will stop the imposition of the ACF, and that remains our stance. Concerning the impact of the ACF on travel agencies, that might be quite a burden to them. Well, as far as the travel agencies are concerned, because they are directly dealing with airlines, and after they have done what Mr. Yu just described, that is after they have completed the study, I'm sure they'll take it up with the airlines, and there'll be direct dialogues, and I encourage the two sides to maintain that dialogue. Well, for the airlines and the travel agencies, yes, they have an interest, and therefore it's very difficult to force them to do anything. I hope that the AA can play your role as an intermediary, or else it's hard for us to get reasonable compensation from them.
Okay.
CEO, anything to supplement? It's difficult for us to intervene in the commercial arrangements between the aircraft carriers and the travel agencies. And I understand that they will discuss with the travel agencies to come up with the most appropriate arrangements. In the event that the negotiation fails, will you provide assistance? We encourage airliners to do their best to heed the request of travel agencies. Ms. Tanya Chen. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to ask about the maximum loan. Well, this is a funding arrangement. This is not a financial report. In 2011, we had a financial advisor's full report, and then in 2015, we also had another financial arrangement plan. And now we have another report with us. I've read all the reports. My question is this: why is it that so much less information is provided in this report? I understand that we're focused on funding plans. Well, let me ask a specific question, because when I was reading the 2015 report, we have a working case cash flow and relevant information. In paragraph 1.4.2, it says the maximum loan to be borrowed would be $77 billion, and that this will take place in 2023-24. But just now, you talked about, in a very lively manner, the funding plan, and then it says that between 2024 and 2025, the maximum loan to be taken out is $78 billion. I wonder if we're referring to the same thing. Is it that there is a delay with higher ceiling? Who would take the question, Mr. Lam? Be it the financial advisor's report or today's PowerPoint presentation, the objective is to raise $69 billion in our funding plan, but this is called incremental borrowings. The airport authority also has operating loans for the 3RS. We have issued bonds which have yet to reach its maturity. It's still in our books. And I thank Ms. Chan for her question. In 2015, there was a figure of some $70 billion. The figure is the outcome of $69 billion of incremental borrowing plus $8 billion existing bonds. But it says out very clearly this is for the 3RS project. Well, it says here that it is for the 3RS project. All of a sudden, you said that this is just a summation. I'd rather pass this to you. Let's have a look. You don't just tell me that because we're talking about the future. We're talking about the 3RS. But now you have included the existing loans taken out by the airport authority, the figure. Mr. Lam, we can go through the report page by page with Ms. Chan. We have incremental borrowings of $69 billion. This is very clear, even in the 2011 and 2015 report. No, but I'm talking about the peak debt level here. It's clearly stipulated. Paragraph 1.4.2, it says very clearly the date as well as the amount. I want to know whether we're on the same page. My 4-minute speaking time is almost up. It says here $78 billion. 2024 and 25. I want to know whether this is the same thing. I'll move on to other questions, Chairman. I see that Mr. Fong just shook his head. I'd like to know the answer because the maximum debt amount will directly affect the credit rating and the cost of borrowing. I haven't finished, Ms. Chen. I just explained the existing borrowings and incremental borrowings. And we have the floor and ceiling of the debt to be raised. That is $55 to $78 billion. That's the lower and upper limit. I don't think we should confuse the two. Mr. Low, please focus on Ms. Chan's question. She asked whether these two are the same, whether these two figures refer to the same thing. That's what's mentioned in the PowerPoint, and also the figure earlier provided in the previous report. She wants to know whether these two refer to the same thing, and please explain the discrepancy. I want to know the maximum debt level of this project. What is it now, and when will it occur? Let me give you a very clear idea. For the 3RS funding, we have incremental borrowing of $69 billion. And we also have the existing borrowings of some existing borrowings that sums up to $77 billion. Chairman, I'm confused. Are you talking about $141.5 billion? And the $78 billion is actually covers $69 billion. I think Secretary would like to supplement. I think that Mr. Low perhaps knows too much about the financing aspect. Perhaps, but I also work in an investment bank. I'm not referring to you when I said the layman. I'm referring to myself. For incremental borrowings, the budget is $69 billion. About the $70-odd billion you quoted from the report, we need to take out the existing borrowing. That means the maximum is. So your understanding is correct. Does it mean that the maximum debt level will be $78 billion, which will appear sometime in 2024 and 25? Yes, that's my understanding. 6 minutes, Chairman. We've spent 6 minutes on it. Right, let's improve it. Mr. Frankie Yick. Thank you, Chairman. After the financial arrangement plan was introduced, we have heard questions from the community. You're going to raise debt. You are going to, at the same time, you suggest that no guarantee or backing from the government is needed. But what if there is a cost overrun? And if you are unable to take out any loans, then, Secretary, you will need to foot the bill. But I recall earlier some information was released. according to the financial advisor, there is still capacity for you to take out further loans. Can you say that for sure? Who would take the question? Like Mr. Yik said, we're going to borrow $69 billion. We have not changed our stance. In the 2015 report, the financial advisor prepared a 5 downside scenarios case study, and that is whether we still have capacity to take out further loans. And according to the study, even in the most extreme scenario, the airport authority still has capacity to cope with the situation. So the report has already established that for this project, we have the sufficient financial capability to cope with it. I need to declare, first of all, that I'm a member of the board of the AHK. I'd like to follow up on the previous question about the ACF to be collected by travel agencies. I understand that the airport authority does not directly deal with them. They should contact the aircraft carriers, but they are outpowered by the airliners. And I'd like to have some assistance from the airport authority, because we face the same issue apart from the airport business, for the maritime business as well. They are only the agent collecting the levy. Why should they bear the cost? I hope that the CEO of the airport authority can help me and follow up on this issue based on what you said. Basically on the point of the cost, it will be borne by travel agencies. Namely, the handling fee for payment with credit cards. Who would take the question? As I explained just now, this is quite a complex issue involving commercial operations. But I'll bring the views of the two members back to the airliners for their consideration. Let me ask you, Mr. Yik, travel agencies collecting ACF on behalf of the AHK, is it stipulated by law that travel agencies should collect on the airport authority's behalf? What if the travel agencies refuse to be the agent? What if the ACF is to be directly collected by the airport or the airliners instead? I think Mr. Yu Siwing should take this question, but I don't think this should be a legal requirement. Now, let me explain. The airliners will include ACF as part of their charges. That is why the travel agencies have no alternative but to collect the levy on their behalf. So what if we refuse? No tickets will be issued. So travel agencies are in a predicament. They have no alternative but to collect on their behalf. And apart from the handling charge for payment with credit cards, there are also other costs. For example, you have the liquidity may be or cash flow may be affected. And if in the case of a default, the travel agency will also need to bear the cost. We need extra manpower as well. And we also need to take care of the costs. But if this is the position of the airport authority, I am quite disappointed. Dr. Kwokaki. Well, Chairman, I have great sympathy for Mr. Yu Siwing, because I think the government is bulldozing it through. They have circumvented the LegCo in implementing the 3RS project. I have been hearing this same remark: no backing or guarantee from the government. But in fact, the government is 100% shareholder of the AHK, so ultimately there is backing from the government. Now, for $47 billion from the operating surplus, it doesn't come from the public and also ACF. In fact, it comes from the public. About incremental borrowings, it comes with a cost, $69 billion or $77 billion. I want to know the costs involved, including the fees for intermediaries and interest, etc. Let me take his question. We've just completed this report. We won't start our fundraising exercise in the market until the third quarter of next year. We are not sure what the interest rate will be, but according to the financial consultancy report in 2015, for an 8-year period with an interest rate fixed at 5%, then the total interest to be paid will be $17 billion. But from the current situation, I reckon that the number would be smaller. So it's throughout the whole period, right, Chairman? Now, we have always heard about this reminder that if you borrow money, you should not pay the intermediary. Everybody knows that. But if the loan is not repaid, then ultimately the government will need to pay up. And we need to invest in various instruments such as MPF, I-bond, and silver bonds. And for the $69 billion borrowings, I think it's very different from commercial loans. For commercial loans, it comes with risks. If it's defaulted, then the company would be declared bankrupt. But not in the case of airport authority, because the government will back the authority ultimately. We are spending $141.5 billion on the three-runway system. We have no idea whether it works. But what is even worse is that the taxpayers will need to pay for the cost of raising loans, some $10 billion.
So everybody in the community will have to chip in, okay, given the fact that we have already got involved. So if the entire sum will be raised in the form of bonds by the airport authority, like green bonds, retail bonds, and so on. So in the end, for the $10+ billion, will that be returned to the public in a form of interest? Because after all, the money comes from the public. So would that be possible? That's point number one. And number two, when you calculate the cost, you are doing the calculation on the basis that there will be no cost overrun. But then cost overrun has been very commonplace these days. So if there should be any cost overrun, so for the $69 billion, that would definitely not be enough. So have you done any calculation? And also, what about the additional fundraising cost? How much will that be? Have you done any calculation at all? Who is to answer the question? Well, of course, our work is to minimize the risk of cost overrun. And at this stage, we are still very confident that we should be able to complete the project within the estimated cost of $141.5 billion. As to whether or not we'll be working with the monetary authority so that the airport authority will help us issue the bonds, well, honestly, at this stage, we haven't discussed that yet. But then if the entire sum of $69 billion were to be issued in the form of retail bonds, then the interest payment will, of course, be much higher than what we had estimated to be. So we will do that in a in the most cost-effective manner in order to minimize any financial cost. So most of it will be issued in the form of institutional bonds. We believe that that would be most cost-effective. Chairman, a follow-up. So what's the differential? What's the cost differential? Well, Bureau Director. Yes, thank you, Dr. Kwok, for your question. With regard to the risk of cost overrun, well, basically, as Mr. Lam just said, they've been doing that very cautiously in estimating the progress and the cost, so that there would not be any cost overrun. Even within the government, we also have multi-layers monitoring, and we've been working with the airport authority to monitor the progress, including financial arrangements, so that when we put our heads together, that should also minimize the risk of cost overrun. Yes, if you look at our financial advisors report and also media reports, there are different scenarios. There might be scenarios under which we might portray a situation whereby there might be cost overruns, but then these are just hypothetical cases. Well, just now you might have come in a bit late. Well, during their presentation, I was watching upstairs, because if you look at the PowerPoint, well, there's also a revolving bank facility, so that's a top-up approach, so that when in the event that there is any cost overrun, the bank will guarantee that there will be a revolving facility available to them. And also, for the minimum loan is $55 billion, but then the ceiling can be as high as $78 billion, so they can make adjustments. Well, just now, Mr. Lam also talked about the cost differential, for the retail bonds, according to the Monetary Authority, the HKMA. That is, every Hong Kong citizen will be entitled to buy that bond. And of course, for institutional buyers, of course, we understand the difference. But then, if you issue it in the form of institutional bonds, or if you issue it in the form of retail bonds, of course, there will be a cost differential, because you're talking about some $64 billion green bonds or institutional bonds. But then when you compare that with issuing the $64 billion bond as retail bonds, what's the cost differential? What's the cost differential in terms of interest payment and so on? Well, of course, we are still not yet in that stage. We haven't really issued the bonds. It's very difficult for us to come up with an accurate estimate. And of course, we will also have to monitor the interest rate trend. Well, we will start that in the third quarter next year. But then according to the general situation for retail bonds when compared to institutional bonds, well, the interest rate will be different by 100 to 150 points. And of course, for retail bonds, we understand that in a community it will be highly popular. That's why, according to the HSBC report, for $3 to $5 billion retail bonds, we also suggest that we should be looking at $5 billion as the target. We believe that on the whole, in terms of cost control, that would also be acceptable to us. Dr. Kwok? Well, in terms of financial arrangements, I'll have to talk with you, because for I bonds and silver bonds, well, in the market it's highly popular, and the AA, what they're going to do as retail bonds, well, that will also be very popular as a form of investment too. Well, I was asking them to raise the ceiling. I'm not asking them to cut it. But then the AA also has to bear in mind the cost implications. So they'll have to pay more in the form of interest payment. Of course, that would be popular or welcomed by the public. So please do consider that. Yes, Mr. Jeremy TAM. Well, Chairman, I was going to ask some financial questions, but then Mr. Yiu also brought up an issue which I was also very interested, because he was talking about the credit card cost, which is now being transferred to travel agencies, but then it has nothing to do with airlines. Well, I have to declare interest because I'm a staff of airlines, but of course, whatever they make in the form of profits has nothing to do with me. But then, after all, you're just doing that on behalf of the AA, so they're paying you this. All right, for the $26 billion. Okay, I don't know what's the credit card cost, 2%. So it's about $260 billion. And if you multiply that by 2, that would be some $5 billion or $500 million. So basically, you should be repaying them, because they are just doing that on your behalf. And of course, they will have to show you that the cost has been incurred directly, because they have to charge the ACF on your behalf. So the AA should be paying them from your recurrent expenditure. Isn't that right? Can you answer the question? Which one to answer? Well, between us and the airlines, we have this commercial arrangement. That is, they'll charge this on our behalf. And between us and the airlines, with regard to this commercial agreement, this is a very complicated issue. And given the fact that it's commercial secret, we cannot disclose the details. And in the process of our negotiation with airlines, well, of course, the airlines will also be looking at our respective needs. That is, out of the ACF, what kind of charge will have to be paid. And we'll be more than happy to discuss that with the airlines as to how the ACF should be shared between us. But then I'd just like to stress that because of this, well, as to the relationship between airlines and their other clients, it's hard for us to interfere. It's hard for us to barge in. We cannot dictate as to what should be done by the airlines or what should not be done by them. So please do understand that. I've already expressed my views. I think it should be the AA taking up the cost. All right, I'll move on. Well, what I'd like to ask is, if you look at the chart, first of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Law for your very detailed presentation. But then what I'd like to know is that, well, in the detailed funding plan and also the implementation timeline, you also have different options and also different amounts will be involved. So I'd like to know is, will you have any sensitivity tests? For example, under institutional bonds, if I increase that or reduce that, and then for retail bonds and also for bank loans and so on, if there is any plus or minus, so what will the implication be in the form of interest payment? So what's the change going to be like? So only then will we be able to tell whether or not the proportion is right, whether or not is a reasonable way of going about your fundraising. And also is about credit rating. Well, you're talking about a long timeline. You're talking about 2017 to 2025. So during that period, you'll be raising funds. And if you've taken that up in different phases, that would also affect your credit rating. For example, by 2022, well, assuming that you've already issued 10-year and also 7-year USD bonds. So in the last 5 years, in the final 5 years, you've already taken up some loans or you've issued some bonds. So in the final phase of your bond issuance, what will your credit rating be like? How far would it drop? So can you tell us more about this? Well, thank you, Mr. Tam, for your question. Well, under this plan, this is just a framework. So under that, we have also tested out with different scenarios. For example, for Hong Kong dollar bonds, can we increase that? Can we reduce the proportion of USD bonds? This is very flexible because we have to keep that flexibility in order to meet our actual needs and also the market conditions. That's why you raised the point just now. That is, under this scenario, would there be sensitivity tests? Yes, we have done that. But then I can also conclude, as Mr. Lam just said, on the overall 5% interest rate estimate, well, that's the conclusion given to us by the advisor. That is, whichever way we go, given that flexibility, that should be within the 5% range. So can you tell us exactly what kind of sensitivity tests have you conducted? Can you tell us the details? Well, under different scenarios, we consider the different scenarios. We believe that this is the best way out. That is the most appropriate package. That's why we have only issued that in the report. With regard to credit rating, well, basically what you said was right. That is, with the increase in loans and also the issue of bonds, that would have an impact on our credit rating. But then in our 2015 report, we have already emphasized repeatedly, well, when we came up with this basic proposal, by 2024-25, at the peak of the fundraising, we would still be able to keep a very good credit rating. We should still be able to keep it. But then what about well, I've been very relaxed about the time constraint, so you will have to wait for your next round. Yes, Mr. Chen, I'm concerned about the retail bonds, $5 billion and the 3-year tenor. Well, the interest, the cost will be higher than commercial loans, because when interest rates goes up, when the demand from the market is higher, the interest rate would also go up correspondingly. But then when compared to retail bonds, the interest rate is fixed. In the international market, they've already gone into the rate hike cycle. And of course, for commercial banks, they're going to increase interest rates as well. So in the end, if you calculate the cost, I've done that myself. Well, for retail bonds, assuming that, well, you just said that it's about $20 billion from bank loans. All right, you've raised $20 billion from the banks, and if there's $5 billion to be issued as retail bonds, because in the end, bank loans will see an increase in interest rate payment. But then for $5 billion retail bonds, the interest rate is fixed. But then in the end, for retail bonds, there is an advantage that you will not be able to get from the banks. That is, the public will be involved, and also the interest rate will be static, because that will be fixed. So I think that's good in terms of risk sharing. So please do not resist the idea. That is, please do not think that because the interest rate for retail bonds, well, at the start it might be higher, and that's why you should go for bank loans. In fact, that's not as simple as what you might see on the face of it. And also for retail bonds, I think there is an advantage. You can also share the risk with the community, and the public can also be involved, so that they would favor this project instead of just hearing from the community what they are not happy about. They would just say that this is a bad project, this is not going to be good for them. But then we believe that with the increase of patronage and also more passengers using the airport, I think that's a good project. And therefore, other than the 3-year bond, you should also be issuing 5-year bonds to the market. And also, I think the ceiling should also go up, because I think it's good for the public to be involved. And also for the interest rate for 3 to 5-year tenure, it might not be the interest rate might not be higher than that from bank loans. And also in the medium term, you have not thought about retail bonds if you look at the table. So as I said, at the beginning, you would allow the public to be involved, so that there can be 3 to 5-year bonds, and also the interest rate might be somewhat higher at the beginning. But then in the medium term, you should also consider issuing more retail bonds instead of just finishing it up after issuing $5 billion worth retail bonds. You should be looking at it more seriously.
Second question, I'd like to talk about the ACF. As Mr. Yu Suing just now said, if the travel agencies are required to bear the cost, and we also had the airport tax with the president of the government requiring airliners to pay the cost, we should follow this precedent. If the travel agencies are paying for the cost, then they should not be ignored. You need to have the will to resolve this fundamental issue, and the solution will come naturally. I hope that the AA will consider it carefully. Who will take his questions? Let me take the first question. We agree strongly with Mr. Chen's remarks on retail bonds. There are advantages. For example, it shares the risk, overall speaking, in our borrowing exercise with public participation. That is why we're happy to include retail bonds as well. Whether the tenor should be one of 3 or 5 years, it depends on the market needs. The public may think that the 5 years may be too long and that 3 years will be more suitable. I think at the time of actual issuance, we'll make adjustments according to the circumstances. Now, we plan to have an issue size of $5 billion, but it depends on the market response and also our financial position. By then, we will not exclude the possibility of issuing more retail bonds. As to the second question about the airport construction fee, I think as far as the government's airport tax is concerned, I'll leave that to the government. But basically, I think the arrangement in principle will be the same. Mr. Frank Chan, any response? Chairman, I think Mr. Chan, Mr. Yu, and Mr. Yik, they're all referring to the same concern. That is the dealings between the airliners and the travel agencies, how they explore this issue, the negotiations. I think after all, they need to put their heads together. For the airport authority to intervene, I don't think it's appropriate. However, we can enhance communication. We can facilitate their negotiation. I think we can give it a thought. Second round. Mr. Chan, please wait for your next round. Mr. Yu Si-wing, followed by Ms. Tanya Chan. Just now, the CEO commented on the ACF, and he said that it depends on the borrowing situation. Once the loans are completed, they will stop charging the ACF. According to the financial estimate prepared, it is now standing at the year 2030. However, if for some reason the loan aren't repaid by 2030, does it mean that the ACF will continue to be charged indefinitely? Or is it that you should fix it at a rate of, say, 18%, and that's that? I think there should be some principle here. Otherwise, we don't see a timetable. And in the future, the industry will continue to bear the cost indefinitely. You're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars of cost, but the figure will continue to snowball. And the figure will have to be borne by the industry. I wonder if you have given this any consideration. Who would take the question? Secretary. On airport construction fee, Chairman. Let's not forget at the time when we proposed charging this levy, we've put forward a number of principles. When would we stop charging the levy? When all the loans have been repaid for the 3RS project, we'll stop charging the levy. And we've also stated that we will not adjust the ACF. All right, very clear. The ACF will not be raised, and when it's enough, is enough. Meaning what? Meaning that the loans have been repaid. But what happens if you haven't repaid the loan even by 2046? I like to ask a follow-up question. For the 3RS, when will you recover the cost with an investment of $141.5 billion? When will you balance the books? Thank you, Chairman. According to the financial consultants' study, in relation to all borrowings related to 3RS, 6 years after the commissioning of 3RS in 2024, meaning 2030, we will be able to repay all the loans. In the coming few years, if the books are good, we should be able to repay all the loans. And we may stop charging the ACF. Once the 3RS project is completed, we expect to have an increase in passenger capacity, and this will help improve the airport's operation. It is also our objective. So, Mr. Yu Si-wing, so that means 6 years after commissioning of the 3RS, you can expect that the ACF will not be charged by then. So it's an assessment of 6 years. I have a second question, very short one. I hope that the government and the airport authority will assist in terms of the dealings between the two stakeholders. Don't just pass the buck to the airliners and the travel agencies, because we're all working to facilitate the 3RS project. The Hong Kong Polytechnic University has completed a study, and this is an issue close to our heart. If such a costly burden is placed on the industry. I don't think that this is the right attitude we should take. Let me also respond to that. In the past, Mr. Yu already discussed this issue with us, and over the past 1 or 2 years, we have been discussing with the travel agencies. We have been working with them, and we will try our best to provide as much assistance as possible to the travel agencies. As I mentioned just now, in reality, we have complex business relationships, and it is not really easy for us to intervene. Even between travel agencies, you have different levels. You have the intermediaries and you have the larger ones. So after collecting the fee, how should the cost be shared? There are practical issues to consider. I think that we should rely on the market to come up with the best commercial arrangement. But since this is an issue close to the heart of many members, we'll go back and relay this message to the aircraft companies so that they can consider all the views. Secretary, you'd like to supplement? I'm not defending the airport authority. As the CEO just now mentioned, in the negotiation process, the AA should not intervene. But as I mentioned just now, what we can do is to facilitate communication, to understand the positions and difficulties of different stakeholders, and then to help a consensus be reached between travel agencies and the airliners. We hold the same stance. We'd like to facilitate cooperation as well. Ms. Chan, you asked about cost recovery. Well, it's an infrastructure project. Even for the 3RS project, you're thinking about cost recovery? $141.5 billion of investment. I'd like to learn more about that as well. But let me come to my question. On retail bonds, we have different views. I have reservations that it should be, the issue size should be raised substantially, because we're talking about a spread of 100 to 150 basis points. That means the cost of borrowings will definitely increase. I don't know whether this will affect the airport construction fee, whether you will collect ACF for an even longer period, and this will be Mr. Yu's concern. Now, you talked about the peak debt level, and that's the term in Chinese when Mr. Low replied to a member's question. I want to know whether the borrowing cost will be higher from $77 to $78 billion, up by $1 billion, and the period will also be lengthened. I just want to know more about this. I think it's confirmed by the secretary, not by you. I wonder if he was right in confirming that. In the paper, you also mentioned that the objective of the funding plan is, according to paragraph 4E, minimize the refinancing risk. Are you talking about cost overrun? Because in the case of cost overrun, you need to carry out refinancing. I want to know under what circumstances will there be refinancing. A number of questions. Who would take the question? Mr. Low. I clarify once again that we also take out loans as the airport authority, and we're not going to have incremental borrowings of $69 billion. In the 2016-17 report, we have been using the same term, incremental borrowings. The secretary just now gave a very good explanation on our behalf. So that's $69 billion plus $800 million existing borrowings, meaning $77 billion. And that's the figure quoted by Ms. Chan's report. And about $78 billion as quoted today, as I explained in the PowerPoint presentation, this is just the upper limit. Our goal is still to raise $69 billion of debt, and we should focus on that. And that's the first point on financing. On refinancing, it means that whether it's a bank loan or a bond, upon maturity, if you're required to repay and if you need further financing, you can have refinancing or you can issue another bond. Refinancing is a risk because during the construction period, if the previous loan period is up And if we're required to issue a new bond, we need to consider whether the market situation is ripe for that. But what about revolving, Chairman? Does it mean that after cost overrun you need to issue another bond? Doesn't it mean that it's cost overrun already? For risk management, we're not talking about cost overrun. To avoid refinancing risk, we take it from different approaches. Let's say if the repayment period doesn't start until the project is completed and before the project is, the 3RS is commissioned, then there will be a smaller risk. Well, Tanya, what's your understanding of refinancing risk as a result of cost overrun? I'm asking, under what circumstances will there be refinancing? Cost overrun? Bingo, you're right. I'm just speaking through you, Chairman. Right, because they dare not admit that there will be cost overrun. But Mr. Fong is shaking his head. Any word not coming from his mouth, he shakes his head. They are confident there will not be any cost overrun. I think it's about funding match. Let me clarify. We want to avoid refinancing. That is why, when we prepare this plan, we have in mind that the repayment won't take place until the project is completed, so as to minimize uncertainties. We're not suggesting that if we are short of funds or if we have surplus, we need to carry out another round of financing. Let's say we have a tenure of 3 years instead of 7 or 10 years. Of course, after 3 years, the project will still not be completed and will need to refinance again. But that is why, in our plan, the repayment period doesn't start until we have completed the project, such that there won't be the issue of refinancing. As for revolving loan, we need to keep it flexible. Revolving loans, commercial loans with banks, sometimes we may be able to get more competitive interest rate with a shorter period. Not in the case of bonds. We need to gauge the market situation by then. We need to keep things flexible so that we can keep the borrowing cost to a minimum. Next, Dr. Kwok and Dr. Elizabeth Kwok, actually, the first round, followed by Dr. K.K. Kwok. Thank you, Chairman.
For the paper mentions green bonds, I think there is a huge demand for that, and the DAB has been trying to promote this. Well, according to your explanation, you said that for the passenger terminal at the 3RS, there is a higher chance that you'll be able to issue retail bonds for that. So I'd like to know to what extent will you be able to do it, what's the advantage, and also will it be confined to the passenger terminal or can it be done elsewhere? Alright, I'll try to answer this question. Well, for green bonds, we are very interested in it because we've also invested a lot of our efforts and energy as well as some resources on this in order to ensure that the 3RS will be able to meet the tightest environmental requirements. But then in doing this, it's not just about suggesting that this amount of bonds would be green bonds, because to a certain extent it has to be packed with some green assets. In doing this, well, we will try to do some verification first. We'll try to identify which part of the 3RS project would be appropriate for issuing green bonds, and then as to how much we're going to do in the form of green bonds, and to what extent will that be well received by the market. Well, at least right now, from what we can see, well, for the passenger terminal at the 3RS, it should be in line with the requirements, because we are asking that for the design and the architecture itself, it has to meet the BEAM Plus standard, and we believe that that should be able to meet the requirements for green bonds. So that's what we can see as a possibility. Of course, we do not exclude other possibilities as to how much we're going to do in green bonds, and which would be packed with, which part of the bonds would be packed with green bonds. Well, Only after we have completed the verification process and also the feasibility studies will we be able to say for sure. Well, according to your current estimate, in issuing green bonds and compared to issuing other forms of bonds, are there any advantages? And are you particularly inclined to moving towards more green bonds? To meet the requirements of green bonds is not just about the project itself, that it has to meet environmental requirements or it has to be green itself. Every year we will have to do the verification process again. So in terms of the administrative cost, it will be somewhat higher. But at present, apparently in the market, in terms of interest rates, the advantage of green bonds, there is no distinctive differential with other forms of bonds. But then, as I said, there are 2 PowerPoints showing that apparently the demands will grow in the future. And we believe that given the prevailing trend, green bonds might become more advantageous in terms of its interest rates, and therefore it might become more feasible. So under these circumstances, we'll be more than happy to work harder in that direction so that we might be able to issue more green bonds. Well, of course, I think that green bonds in itself has a high potential in the market, and therefore we should try to go for it. And in order to meet the requirements, we have to meet environmental requirements. And I think both for the airport's image and also for the contribution it can make in terms of the environment, it should be good. And therefore, I hope that the AA should consider this in order to try and increase the green elements of the project so that we can issue more green bonds. Thank you, Dr. Kwok, and then Jeremy TAM. Thank you, Chairman. I've been talking about retail bonds. I think for the general public, well, they do not enjoy any interest rate return from their bank deposits. So for any interest from retail bonds to the ordinary public, I think is a good tool for their investment, so that would provide an incentive for the public. So I hope that you can consider it. And second, well, according to some credit rating agencies, they've been considering Hong Kong together with China, and as a result, our credit rating has been downgraded. So banks are there to make profits. They are not doing a charitable business. So when your credit rating has been falling, they will try to kill you when you're sick. And given the fact that our credit rating has been dropping or falling, so what's the cost implications on you? So that's the first question. Second, and I think the Bureau Director might be able to answer as to how much you can repay and when you can repay. That would depend on the extent of the 3RS, that is how far it can work. So how confident are you that you'll be able to get the mainland authorities agreement? Because since the former Bureau Director, we've been asking him to show us the document that you can indeed use the airspace with the mainland authorities and so on. He has not been able to do it. So to what extent can you do it now? Well, let me answer the second question first. Well, for the 3RS of the airport, well, it's very important to Hong Kong's long-term development and also to our economy. And we're talking about a 70 million passenger flow every year. And then with the 3RS, we're talking about 100 million passengers a year. And then for cargo trade, we are talking about the highest cargo flow in the world. And then upon the completion and commissioning of the 3RS, we are talking about some 9 million tons of cargo going through the airport every year. As to whether or not there can be better coordination so that we can have 102 flights taking off and landing every hour. In fact, our chief executive went there to, President Xi also went to the airport himself, and also he indicated that with regard to the airport authority and also the 3RS, he showed his personal support. And we have also got this confirmed by the mainland authorities. So please do have confidence in us and also in the mainland authorities. In other words, after the 1st of July, because Mr. Xi did say that at the airport, and subsequently there were also extensive media reports, that is our state with regard to the Hong Kong International Airport and the 3RS, they would give us their full support. So upon the completion of the 3RS, as to the overall operation and revenue, we are highly confident. But what about the agreement? You're referring to the 102 flights per hour target. Well, in the past, our agreements with the mainland, in particular when it comes to airspace agreement, well, for such negotiations, that would have a huge impact on economic development, and also in terms of the number of flights per hour. I also hope that you'd understand this. That is, well, in the Pearl River Delta, we are within the Pearl River Delta, and indeed there are several airports, and every city would like to maximize its own developments so that there can be a healthy competition. Well, the thing is how we collaborate with one another, and also how we can also smoothen the process so that there would not be any adverse or negative impact on the other side. So we will have to sit down and talk things out. There needs to be more collaboration, and we've been maintaining very close liaison with the mainland authorities. And earlier on, I've been talking to the Civil Aviation Department of the mainland, and we've been talking about the HKIA and also the 3RS. With regard to the downgrading of our credit rating, I'll defer to the airport authority. Who is to answer? Yes, thank you, Chairman. Recently, well, Standard & Poor's downgraded our credit rating, and we have not done the same yet. I think the market's response was very cool, and during the past 2 weeks or so, and we've managed to see the issuance of bonds was up to tens of billions of dollars. And as to the implication, earlier on in answering another member's questions, I've said that well, if you look at the whole period, we're talking about the 8-year period, and we are adopting a fixed rate approach. And in the 2017 report, the financial advisor also reiterated that that's a very robust assumption. And just now, Mr. Fred Lam also said that well, we've also conducted some sensitivity tests. I emphasize that those are sensitivity tests only. It's not about our estimate of what's going to happen in the future. All right, we tested that, well, on top of the 5%, if it should go up to 7%, well, we believe that the entire financial plan is still robust and feasible. So that should be okay. As to credit rating agencies, will they further downgrade our rating? Well, I cannot tell, because it's up to them to decide. Next, Mr. Lo Wai Kwok, you've just come in. Yes, sorry, Chairman, I'm late because I have other engagements in the morning. Well, the Business and Professional Alliance, or Business and Economic Alliance, has made our stance very clear. That is, we believe that for the HKIA, if you look at this track record, the future 3RS will be giving rise to a lot of opportunities. It should not be difficult for us to raise funds in the market. Many investors will be more than happy to consider investing in us. But then we believe that the public should be able to participate in this process, because the airport belongs to the community. We are more than happy to see it completed and commissioned. And we believe that the Hong Kong public should be able to get a reasonable return from the operation. In fact, for the ordinary public, what they can get out of the investment in the airport should be somewhat higher than other investment tools. I think in the long run it's going to be good. Well, we are seeing very low interest rates in the market in the long run. Even if the public holds some assets and money, they still have no idea as to where they should invest that in. So if there are retail bonds available in the market so that the public can invest their money in, I've been talking to some friends, and we are looking forward to this from the AA. On the one hand, the public will be able to invest their money in some high yield bonds, and basically it's very robust and safe. And on the other hand, it would also highlight the importance of the Hong Kong International Airport, because this is something that we built together. That's why I would give it my full support. Also, I'd like to say that the AA and the Bureau Director would also have that as your mission. That is, there are going to be several major projects which will be commissioned, including our XRL, the Hong Kong-Macau-Zhuhai Bridge, and also the 3RS. We basically would like to see better collaboration between or among the sea, air, and marine traffic. Well, we've been talking about this, and for the XRL's operation and also the co-location of immigration facilities and so on. Well, the BCA has been saying that we should have the co-location of the facilities at West Kowloon, so that there can be better collaboration between or amongst the air, sea, and land traffic. I believe that the public and our trade would have high expectation on the 3RS, and we hope that both the administration and the persons in charge of these public facilities will be doing their best to ensure that there will be better coordination amongst these three. Alright, that's the personal comment of Mr. Low. We are all clear about that. Next, Jeremy TAM. Thank you, Chairman. Well, a quick question, and I hope to get a quick answer. I'd like to just confirm this with you. Alright, for the funding proposal, you're talking about $69 billion. Has that already included the revolving credit facility? Or is it that there will be $10 billion as revolving credit facility out of the $69 billion? Well, for the revolving credit facility is on top of the fundraising, so that's outside of it. So that's for the that's for emergency need. So the $10 billion will be revolving credit facility. It's not included in the fundraising plan. And also under 20(2)(a)(11), you said that well, if the AA is not able to repay any debt, then the government will back it up and bail it out by repaying such loans. So is my understanding correct?
Secretary. To respond to the provision cited by Mr. Jeremy TAM, Mr. TAM is correct, but I'd like to lay out the whole fact. First, the operation of the airport authority is based on commercial prudence principle. In subsection 2A, it is set out clearly. When should the government intervene, or to foot the bill, as you put it? This is done on one condition. If the government directs the airport authority to engage in something not based on public interest, and if a loss is incurred, the government will then need to so-called compensate. As for the 3RS project undertaken by the airport authority, through and through, the government has not given any direction or instruction, which means that the so-called compensation is non-existent. I just want to clarify things, Secretary. I hope you understand. You said that the airport authority's project is not done upon the request of the government. I don't quite understand. Does it mean that there is no government policy in this regard and the AA has taken it up on its own initiative? Let me give you one example. As an independent entity, the airport authority operates in accordance with its management policies and their core values. The AA is required to fulfill its corporate responsibility under commercial prudence principles according to the provision. If there are things that lead to a commercial loss, then based on the commercial prudence principles, the AA should not engage itself in such matters. However, if this is something done out of public interest, bringing benefit to society, then despite knowing that risks may entail, AA will still do it. And if ultimately AA does suffer a loss, the government will need to compensate. Now, let's cut it short. Of course, the 3RS has the support of the government. Otherwise, we will not implement this project. Let's say if the loss is incurred as a result of soaring prices, and if there is a cost overrun, and if the AA is unable to repay the loans, then will the government act in accordance with the principle set out in 22A11 and foot the bill? Not in the case of the 3RS project. We should move on to the next item, because Mr. Jeremy Tam, the Deputy Chair, and Mr. Michael Look has written letters respectively to the subcommittee. Deputy Chair Mr. Tam on the 21st and 22nd of September wrote in requesting that the subcommittee discuss issues relating to the marine work safety of the three-runway system and also the outcome of the survey on the working population of the airport. Perhaps we should invite the airport authority to walk us through these two topics. We're doing it quite hastily. Secretary. Now, these are members' concerns, and I understand that this is quite hasty, Chairman, and I actually have a better suggestion. I think after the meeting, the airport authority can have a meeting with the two members and get an understanding about the concerns of members. And we can deal with the issue this way. But I leave the matter in the hands of Chairman. Mr. Tam, the administration would like to further communicate with you to understand better your concern. What's your take? I want to make it clear, Chairman. Are we going to discuss the timetable for discussion or the actual issue? Mr. Tam, according to your letter, you want to discuss the marine work safety. Oh, about that one. And now the Bureau would like to explore further the issue of marine work safety, as you suggest. Right, Chairman, but this is an issue of public concerns as well, and also other members. Now, strictly speaking, the subcommittee deals with three issues. First, airspace. Second, financial arrangements. And third, manpower. As for marine work safety, this should be discussed by the panel because it relates to the Marine Department, not the actual construction of the 3RS, which is under the purview of the subcommittee. Marine work safety should be taken up by another panel. It's not within the terms of reference of this subcommittee. I'm relaxing the scope already. I am inviting the Bureau and the Airport Authority to discuss with you in private. I think officially this issue should go back to the panel. Chairman, so how are we going to deal with this? So do you agree that the airport authority and the administration will approach you to discuss further the measures regarding ensuring marine work safety? Because this will not be dealt with by the subcommittee itself. This, if taken up, should be taken up by the panel. Sorry, speaker's not coming through. Right, the mic wasn't on just now, so everybody hears now. As an engineer by profession, on 2 occasions, I went on to the barge for a visit to understand the operation of the reclamation. And the airport authority and its project team implement different measures to ensure marine work safety. They have drills for inclement weather, such as typhoon, how the barges and the working vessels should be dispersed. But I think that his point is also valid. I think we should have an explanation in writing. Or Dr. Low, the Deputy Chairman is concerned about the fibre being stranded in the works area. We also paid a visit. I read his letter, Chairman. I think that Mr. Jeremy TAM isn't only concerned about a single incident. He's also concerned about the policy as a whole. Right, we have other items. Tanya? Well, I think that we'll be happy with an explanation in writing. Tanya. Now, if you don't mind, I think that Mr. Michael Look is also concerned about this because he has also written in and he can liaise with Mr. Tam as well. Mr. Look is at the moment not here, right, but he was present during the roll call. Chairman, let's see if we can invite the Bureau and the AA to submit a paper about this. Well, in fact, there is a very brief response in writing from them. Well, it says here that they will contact the individual members. All right, Chairman, we'll heed members' views. We'll give a reply in writing. Our Secretary is really easygoing. There is also another issue. Deputy Chairman Mr. Jeremy TAM also wrote to the subcommittee in accordance with the Handbook 26, paragraph 26C. The subcommittee should complete its work in 12 months' time. If the subcommittee is of the view that the work should be extended, a request should be made with the House Committee. On the 7th of July 2017, at the House Committee meeting, members agreed that for the 4 chosen subcommittees, including our subcommittee, if there is a request to extend the subcommittee's work, the House Committee will give its approval. Upon expiry of the subcommittee after 12 months to extend its work in the 2017-18 year. So the subcommittee will expire after its 12-month period on the 10th of November 2017. On this reason, at the meeting of the 10th of July 2017, Mr. Jeremy TAM has recommended that we apply with the House Committee to extend the subcommittee's work. And I'd like to consult members whether we need to extend the subcommittee's work. I'd like to hear members' views. Tanya. Yes? Dr. Low. Chairman, of course, the 3RS is an issue close to our heart. However, about extending this subcommittee, we need to consider a number of things. First, I think for the issues of our concern, we can follow them up on at the respective panels. Second point, I think that we are also aware of many subcommittees waiting in line to start their work. And we need to strike a balance. For matters relating to the 3RS, my take is to follow them up at the respective panels so that we vacate the slot for other subcommittees to start their work. Otherwise, for other subcommittees, they won't be able to follow up on their issues. So I don't support extension of this subcommittee, but it doesn't mean that I don't support the work of the 3RS. Next, EQ. We're also concerned about the 3RS, but this subcommittee has been convening meetings for some time, and I also agree that the issues should be followed up at the respective panels. We have many subcommittees waiting in line, and regrettably, we have scrapped the subcommittee on animal welfare, and I think that if we extend our work, that it will be very unfair to other subcommittees waiting in line. We have reached this stage of our work. I think that the issue should be followed up on at the panels. Next, Holden, followed by Mr. Tam. I also agree that we all would like to follow up on the 3RS issues. But if the subcommittee is extended, it will affect other subcommittees which would like to start its work on issues of their concern. So I agree with other members. I think the issues can be discussed and followed up on at other panels. At the same time, we can vacate the slot for other subcommittees. So I don't support extending this subcommittee. The issues should be followed up by the panels. Deputy Chairman, I support extending the work of this subcommittee for a number of reasons. Last time, members at the House Committee already agreed that should we ask for an extension, they would support it. So it's not the case of objection by the majority. In fact, the majority of colleagues agree that extension could be given should we ask for it. And as you can see, I have set out, in the event of extension, a number of things that we can discuss based on the report of the last subcommittee.
And also in my request for setting up this subcommittee and also the terms of reference, actually there are things that have not been touched on, so we should continue with that work. That's why I've set out that in the form of a table for your reference, and also Mr. Lok Chung Hong also referred to manpower, and that would also be included in the terms of reference that are proposed. Well, unless you say that well, there are 7 items together, and if the administration is able to undertake that at different panels, all these items can be dealt with, then that's fine. But then, if other panels might not be able to take up all the issues here, then I think there is a need for us to continue with the subcommittee so as to follow up on these issues. Because if there are no other panels that are able to take them up, then this subcommittee will be the only avenue available. So unless the government promises that all these issues can be discussed in the next 12 months at other forums, then that's fine. Otherwise, I think we should extend the work of the subcommittee. Thank you. Next, Mr. Yu Si Wing. Thank you, Chairman. With regard to the 3RS, I have been attending the meeting almost every time, and I'm sure everybody knows very well what the issues are. And of course, Mr. Jeremy TAM is concerned about many issues. We might not have been able to discuss those in depth at our meetings, but can that be discussed or taken up by the panel? Will the chairman of the panel then think that, okay, you will have to queue up, and the progress might be lengthened as a result of that, because there are too many items on the list for the panel. And if you think that we've already completed the work of the subcommittee, and in 3 months' time, can we discuss issues relating to the 3RS? But then during the interim, well, instead of having monthly meetings, we can also deal with that in depth. So will that do? That is to have quarterly meetings, for example. Well, Chairman, I'd like to declare that I'm a member of the AA. I agree with what Mr. Yu just proposed. For example, today, as the Chairman just said, if you look at our terms of reference and also the tenure, all right, as you can see, we have the funding plan and also the related issues. Well, instead of having 2 or 3 meetings a month to follow up on this, I think we can see that we should track the progress, and I think it's more appropriate to take it up at the panel. And if there is a need next year, we can suggest that the subcommittee be set up again, because I agree with what Ms. Elizabeth Quad said. That is how we have to give way to other issues. It's not that we don't care about the 3RS, but then there are other pressing issues that we have to take care of. Ms. Tanya Chen, I think everybody says that the airport is very important and the 3RS is also very important, but then all of a sudden you suggest that there are other issues that are more pressing. I understand that there are many subcommittees that have to be set up, and of course the queue is so long that I dare not suggest what I want, because I'm sure this year it will not be possible. Well, I would like to suggest that there should be a law on trees and their conservation. Well, I think 3RS is very pressing, and particularly given the long period it takes to build it. And also, I think we have this chart, all right, it plans to raise funds and also for the various facings and so on. It's very complicated. And for the sustainable development for Hong Kong is so important. And Mr. Yu Si Wing or other members can see that there are many outstanding issues to be resolved. All right, you said that we should set up a special meeting for that. All right, if the pro-establishment camp is against it, well, it will be difficult to ask for a subcommittee meeting to be held or convened, let alone a panel meeting. So is it that easy to call a special meeting? And then for regular meetings, well, you might be talking about 3 or 4 such meetings in a year. Alright, if you still remember it, there are many subcommittees, they have a checklist. Alright, there are outstanding issues to be done. There might be issues where the administration has not responded to, but then we don't even have that available. Is it that they have already cleared all the backlogs? Is it that they are so smart that they have already cleared all the backlogs? Alright, today, we are trying to come to a conclusion so hastily it will be kind of difficult. So can we ask the Secretariat to check it? We will have to make an application to the House anyway. So can they come up with a checklist as to what are the outstanding issues, are there any? And also whether or not all the 7 issues raised by Mr. Jeremy TAM can be dealt with within the next 12 months. Alright, do you know what those 7 issues are? I think you can refer to the letter. Well, basically I agree with what Tanya just said. That is, we are talking about a long construction period until 2024, and during that long process there might be many things that might happen which have to be resolved. That's why it's not possible for the subcommittee to extend its tenure indefinitely. Up until the term of this LegCo, we might be talking about another term. We might need to extend it further up until the next term. Well, that might not be possible. That being the case, we will have to go back to the House, and we will have to ask the administration and the AA to report to the panel. I think that would be more realistic. And even if the panel is able to convene special meetings on this, I think that would be more practicable. Well, the Deputy Chairman, Mr. Tam, also said that, under Ray, you're talking about the new aviation or civil aviation or air traffic control system for the 3RS. Well, at the panel, we have already had quite a number of discussions how the two systems should interface, and would that affect the operation of the airport and so on. I think we have already had quite a few discussions on that already. Well, item B, how the additional flights should be distributed, that's also about air traffic control. Well, that's been discussed many times too. And C is about manpower planning related to the 3RS. I think Mr. Luk Chong Hong is most concerned about this. And before you join us, the administration already said that they'd like to talk to you about this. And then D, for the latest works and financial position of the 3RS, we just discussed that. And then E is about environmental issues related to the 3RS. Well, at the very beginning of the term for this subcommittee, we already discussed this. And F is about overseas visit on newly completed sizable airports with high throughputs. I think it's not for me to decide alone. I think we need to go back to the panel, and we have to make an application or suggestion to the House for that to be done. I don't think the subcommittee alone can decide on this, or else we would have gone to different airports around the world to inspect their facilities. So for A to F, I think we have already had very detailed discussions on that. So that's my brief response to you. Okay, Mr. Jeremy TAM, please be brief. We have to grasp our time. Yes, Chairman, you did discuss that. You did say that, but then if you look at the details, in fact, there are issues that we have not taken up. For example, on environmental protection, we have not really talked about the compensation for villages that are affected. Yes, we may have had some discussions on that, but then if you look at the issues that I'm concerned about, in fact, on earlier occasions, we did not cover that at our previous meetings. And also in deciding whether or not it should continue, well, can we also consult those members who are not here today to see if they support it? I've already circulated your letter to them, but then they have not indicated their stance. They have not said whether or not they support it. I'm against asking those who are not attending the meeting, because attending meetings are the responsibility, and if they're not here, they should be held responsible for that. Next, Mr. Look, all right, they are going to spend $140 billion on the 3RS. What's it for? That's to maintain Hong Kong as an international aviation hub. And another purpose is to ensure that jobs will go to Hong Kong people. I think we have already moved on. I don't think we should repeat old tunes. So just tell us your question. So what's your take on the letter? I have to indicate my stance. You should have done so earlier on, but then I had to attend other meetings. You don't have to be so harsh on me. I'm not harsh on you. I'm just, well, I think it's enough. Enough is enough. Well, for human resources, we haven't had many discussions on it. And in fact, for the trade union there, they have been asking that the subcommittee on the 3RS should follow things up, because during our last discussion, we haven't had a very thorough discussion on this. So please do give us another take. All right, you can say that you missed out on certain things, and therefore you will have to have a second take. Well, basically, we can include that at the last meeting next time, and so please make sure that you'll be there throughout the meeting, okay? That's all. Okay, if there are no other issues, then our meeting is now adjourned. Date of next meeting will be notified to members by the Secretariat. So we're discussing the issues suggested by Mr. Luk Chong Hong. Thank you very much for coming.